West Ham need to sell before they can buy in January. Now, I did say I was going to do a video for you today and a little breakdown of the finances. The accounts were released yesterday. I've had a look at them. Money's very, very tight, and it's really, really boring. I don't really want to spend any time doing that, but it's what that means for West Ham, which is the important thing. Look, having read through the accounts, I can see why it's increasingly important for West Ham to try and up the capacity of the stadium up to 66, 67,000, whatever it is. That should bring in another £3-4 million a year, and it won't cost that much to do it. So it's a little bit of a no-brainer in terms of the turnover of the club, which we've got to watch. We're very, very close to not so much Premier League financial fair play, but European financial fair play, which is going to come into importance if we qualify for Europe again, which we may well do. So we're going to have to watch that. It does leave me wondering, having looked at the accounts, I'm not going to spend any more time talking about it, by the way, but it has left me wondering what we would have done if we hadn't sold Declan Rice, because I'm not entirely sure we would have been able to buy anyone at all. It certainly looked pretty bleak at that point, but we'd had a massive spend up, let's be perfectly honest here. To be able to afford it and to be able to afford to spend in January, we're going to have to bring some players in. We need to sell some first. It really is as simple as that. I thought it was just something that maybe the club was saying. They sort of leak information about this sort of stuff, but it does actually look to be the case, and David Moyes has pretty much confirmed that. He said he'd like to bring a couple of players in, but the main thing is we need to get rid of players first, and that's a bit of a bummer, truth be known, because one thing I really thought was important for West Ham in this window, bear in mind we've got a director of football in place, was that we've got our business done early. When you've got a director of football, there's no reason to do your business late. In this instance, Tim Steidten can spend whatever it is, August to December, scouting players, then starting to negotiate with the clubs, identifying the players that he wants to negotiate with the clubs. So when it gets to the start of January, you can bring the players in immediately. This is more important than ever because we've got a situation here where we've got players going off to the African Cup of Nations. In many respects, it's a lot less beneficial to us to bring in a player very end of January when they could have a direct impact on results right now. And sort of the understanding is, I think the West Ham Way are just reporting this actually, that the focus is going to be on a left winger rather than a striker. If you listen to the way David Moyes talks about Jarrod Bowen, you could sort of guess that was the case anyway. And I do think it's one area where we are weak. All the options are not ideal there, whether it's Lucas Paquetá playing over there, not ideal. Benrahma, Fornals, it's not great really, is it? Let's be honest, and there's no point talking about Cornet because he's just not an option. So the fact that we now can't just trigger this player to come in at the very start of January, it is a bit of a problem for us. It does mean we have to sell first, and I'm not sure, looking at the players that we need to sell, whether there's going to be too much urgency from other clubs to get the deal over the line, because that's the problem really. We need to sell quickly, not necessarily to the clubs that we want to buy those players, be they Cornet, Benrahma, Thilo Kehrer or whoever else. They don't necessarily need to get them in early. Now, when I say the money is tight from the accounts, it really, really is tight. I think there's certainly money there in wages, but in terms of personnel, we need to free up some spaces in the squad. So I very much, as someone quoted me yesterday from the club, it's very much one in, one out. Okay, have a look and reading between the lines. If we actually do really want any sort of a budget that we can spend, I do believe it's going to be almost like 2 out and sort of 1 in if you want, although that wasn't the quote that was given to me. That's me looking at it, and that's what I've sort of looked at and extrapolated that from that. I don't know how much this has had to do with it. We paid off a loan. West Ham paid off quite a big loan. It's probably always worth pointing out that there were no directors' dividends or anything like that paid, so there wasn't anyone taking money out the club per se, but a big loan agreement did get paid off. West Ham will need to do something really quick though, and there's no doubt about that at all. And I'm sort of looking at the players who might be an option for some early on, and I do wonder if Danny Ings might be one of those players, because he's somebody that, let's say Southampton would be a really good example. Southampton are, the last time I looked, a third in the league. Now listen, I must admit, the Championship, I haven't looked at that Championship for a week or so. Last time I looked, they were third. Seemed a little bit of daylight between them and the top two. And if they're going to need, the goal scoring seems to be a bit of a problem for them. If they're going to need somebody to fire them up to get them into the automatic promotion spots, then maybe, just maybe, there's a level of urgency from them to get someone in. So maybe Danny Ings gets done quickly. I think looking at the number of clubs that are interested in Thilo Kehrer, maybe that's something that can get done quickly. I also think you've got to look at it from the player's point of view as well. It's not just what players do West Ham want to sell, it's actually which players would like to leave West Ham quickly. Because it's something, so a football agent said in an interview I did a couple of years ago with them, and they said the hardest thing is selling the players. It's easy to buy them. The hardest thing is getting them off the books. So it ain't an easy thing to do, but I do think there's going to be a desperation from Thilo Kehrer to get out of this club. When I'm looking at it, though, what does strike me in all of this is the absolute folly and the fact that we have a load of players on the bench, maybe not defenders, because clearly you can see David Moyes, when he looks to his bench under normal circumstances, he's happy to use Mavropanos, isn't he? That much is clear. He's happy to use Ogbonna. But when we start looking at maybe sort of attacking players, he's not so keen to use these guys. And I was listening to his interview the other day, and he said the words, he said, I've built a good team here at West Ham, and I'd absolutely agree with that. What he's not done is built a good squad. And it shows the desperation that we need, that we have these players on the bench, and there's not really too many of them, with the exception of maybe a couple of defenders, who have the ability to step in and play first team football. Basically, we watched ourselves defend the other day. We watched Mavropanos and we watched Ogbonna, and you didn't look at it and think, oh, look, our defensive standards have dropped there. Fabianski goes in goal. You don't think our standards are dropped. I think if any one of those players, let's say Kudus does fly off to play for Ghana, as we expect, whoever comes in is worse. Let's say Paquetá is still there with his boot on, reading his book. Whoever comes in is considerably worse. And I think that's pretty poor, right? It's not just on the bench now, but even on players like Skamaka and Vlasic, who certainly didn't work out. All our buying from henceforth, from now onwards, has to be so much better. And for that, I'm pleased that we got Tim Steidten in. In many respects, it's a bit of a shame that he wasn't able to spend some of that money that we spent on some of those other players that I just mentioned. We probably would find ourselves in an even more healthy position. It also shows the folly of not having young players from the academy who can step up. Things look like they're going to be pretty grim against Brighton in terms of options off the bench. So, look, players from the youth academy may well be very, very helpful indeed. In terms of selling the players that we need to sell, be they Kehrer, Benrahma, Cornet, whoever it might be, it ain't going to be easy for us. And I think we may well find that we take a little bit of a dip in form. If we don't, and maybe somehow David Moyes can plot a course through this and results remain really good whilst we're trying to sell these players in order to bring in the funds to buy players, then it will be pretty miraculous stuff, and it will be a very, very impressive thing indeed. But there you go. So they're not the accounts. I've not really told you the accounts at all. But the other thing that is probably worth pointing out that did stand out from the accounts is, because of the trouble that there was with the Russia-Ukraine conflict and whatnot, there was an embargo against any money transactions between Russian clubs, and we still owed some of the Russian clubs some money for Vlasic, and I think there was a payment to Alex Kral as well. That embargo was no longer there, so we had to pay money that we were owed. So I think there's a lot of this stuff has sort of had a bit of a dent and impact on the finances. We're not skint, far from it. We're looking really, really healthy financial condition, actually, particularly compared to some clubs. And I think you'd be running a Premier League club pretty poorly if you weren't in pretty good financial health. That much is clear. What it doesn't help us do, particularly now, is bringing in players. So, look, don't expect anyone coming in for 30, 40 million pounds in this window. I certainly don't expect so. What we need to do is we certainly need Tim Steidten to wave his magic wand and hopefully somehow get rid of some of these players. Then and only then we'll be able to see some players coming.